most amazing artist. I hope you are having a fantastic day today. Welcome to week 3 of our Thiebaud pies. The first week we did a quick sketch creating our composition for our pies. You should have one whole pie, one slice of pie, and one pie with a slice cut out of it. You could have done more pies, but you needed at least 3. And last week we started adding color to our pies, having a big focus on value, having some shadows, some midtones, and some highlights. And we were just gonna do one layer at first, whether you did it with markers, which is how I'm doing it. You could have done it with watercolor paints, you could have colored it with crayons or just markers without the water. However you did it, we're gonna go back into it today with the same material that you used last week, and we're gonna make those shadows a lot more dark, and we're gonna make our colors more vibrant. Before you add your second layer though, you need to make sure that your first layer is completely dry. There are no more wet spaces, and hopefully it's been a week now since we worked on these, so hopefully they are dry by now. So grab whatever materials you used last week to add your first layer of color, and let's go ahead and get started. Now the first thing I actually want to do is I thought of something that would help me fill up this space a little bit more, because I felt like there was a lot of white space going on right here, and maybe you have a lot of white space too. So what I want to do is I want to kind of sketch in, use a pencil and sketch in an actual plate that my pie is sitting on. So I'm just going to do very light strokes. And this is what's great about doing your painting in layers, is that you'll be able to add different things as you go through your artwork and maybe change some things or add different elements to it. I just wanted my slice of pie to be sitting on a plate because next time we're actually going to add a tablecloth pattern in the background, and I was worried that my slice of pie might get lost in the patterned background. So I am deciding to put my slice of pie on a plate. So I'm just gonna draw a little circle around it very, very lightly. And if I actually think of a plate, it kind of has 2 circles, one outer edge and then one in the middle. Okay, that might be very hard for you to see, but I have drawn a plate around my slice of pie, and now I'm ready to add some more color. So for me, I'm using markers, some water, and a paintbrush to add color to my artwork. If you're doing this technique, you actually don't need a paintbrush. You can just use your finger in place of your paintbrush. But I will be using a paintbrush today. And I'm gonna start with my pumpkin pie again, and it's essentially the same idea as last week. We're gonna start adding some more color, and I wanted it to be a bit more darker up here. My color kind of faded away whenever I added the water on top, and I want my shadows to be nice and contrasting against the rest of my pies, because if we think of Wayne Thiebaud's artwork, his shadows are very, very dark, so I want mine to also be pretty dark. So I'm gonna add some more shadows, and I chose brown for the shadow on my pumpkin pie here, so I'm gonna go back in with my brown marker. And I'm going to color it in a little bit more than I did last week, because like I said, I want that shadow to be nice and dark. However, I still want it to blend in nicely with my orange, so I'm going to take my orange again, and I'm going to go over it slightly on top of the brown so that it blends nicely with the rest of my pie. So it's all about layering. Layering your colors on top of each other and letting layers dry in between, and then going back in and adding more layers. So maybe after today you've done your second layer and you're still not happy with how dark your shadows are. You can go back in after your painting dries for the second time and add some more shadows, make them even more darker until you're happy with the darkness of your shadows and the vibrancy of your color. I'm pretty happy with the color of my crust. Because I want it to still be a different color than my shadow. I don't want my crust to be too dark to where it blends in with the rest of my pie. So I'm just gonna lightly outline this. I don't want to add too much color, because the more color that you add, the darker your shadows will be. And like I said, I want my crust to be like kind of a lighter brown, so I'm not gonna add too much marker to it. And I need to add some more colors to the cross section in between where this slice has been taken out. Again, layer my orange on top of my brown. I think I need to go back in and add just a little bit more brown. This is a real back and forth technique. You have to keep switching your colors until you're happy with the contrast and the darkness of your shadows and the vibrancy of your colors. And I believe last week I added a bit of yellow to the middle of my pie to make a bit of an interesting color rather than it just being orange all the way down here. I wanted there to be a little bit of a yellow orange color. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to grab some yellow and add it on top of my orange to make a beautiful tertiary color called yellow orange. And for this second layer, I'm coloring in a lot more of the space than I did for my first layer, because I want those colors to be super, super vibrant. And I'm pretty happy with my whipped cream right now. I just wanted some of the shadows to be a little bit darker. So then I have a shadow in there. I'll have a mid-tone from where I did my shadow last time. And I'll leave some white space. I won't even color it all the way in. And the extra white space that I leave will become my highlight. Okay, so now I finished adding my second layer of color to my pumpkin pie, and I'm gonna add just a little bit of water at a time, just like I did last week. We don't wanna add too much water, and my colors did start to fade a little bit last week, so I'm gonna try my best to not add too much water. We just wanna add enough to where those colors start to blend together and to where this marker will start to turn into almost like a watercolor. And in these tiny spaces, we really need to focus and not add too much water to those teeny tiny spaces. Especially on my whipped cream here, I'm just gonna take the tiniest amount of water because this is a very tiny space, and I'm gently going to run my paintbrush right over where I just put that gray marker line. And I'm gonna go over the crust just a little bit because I want that to stay pretty tan. I don't want that to be super dark. So just a little bit of water will go a long way. And I don't want to rub my paintbrush over the same area too many times, because if I go over it too many times with my paintbrush, then I might accidentally rip a hole in my painting. So just be mindful of that as well, because when we add water to paper, it makes it a lot more fragile. And if we go over it too many times, then our paper might start to fall apart. So just be mindful of that as well. And I just thought of something for my crust. If we think of a crust, it kind of has like a crumbly kind of texture. So even though I put some water in there already, I want to go in with my marker and add some little dots to make that texture a lot more realistic than just a flat tan color. And I'm just going to do a few dots and then take just a tiny little bit of water to make those dots turn into paint. And just like we learned last week, if you accidentally add too much water, you can just dry your paintbrush off on your messy mat, or if you're at home, if you have like a paper towel or a napkin or something, dry your paintbrush off almost all the way. And then when your paintbrush is dry, you can pick up that extra water that you don't want. Okay, so there's my second layer of my pumpkin pie, and I might go in after this dries and add just one more layer to see if I can get those shadows even darker and get my pie colors even more vibrant. And I actually just thought of using a gray to go over and add a shadow underneath where my pie would be, because if we think of objects on a table, there is a shadow underneath them. So I'm just going to put a little bit of gray and grab some water and add that shadow under my pie. Just go over it a little bit with your water. So now it looks like my pie is actually sitting on this piece of paper instead of just floating in white space. Okay, so I am done with my pumpkin pie for now. Like I said, I might go back in and do a third layer. It just depends on how it looks when it dries. But I'm gonna go ahead and speed this part up because I'm essentially gonna do the same exact thing that I did over here to my blueberry pie and my cheesecake. I just wanna focus on making those shadows a lot darker and making my colors more vibrant. Okay, so I'm gonna speed this part up and I'll be right back and I'll show you what it looks like. my second layer, and actually by the time I got around to my cheesecake, which is still kind of wet because that's the last thing I did, my pumpkin pie was already dry. So I was able to go in again, since this was dry, and just add a little bit more shadow because I feel like my shadows were getting lost a little bit. So if you find your shadows getting lost in your painting, then once it dries, you can go back in and make those a little bit darker. But it's important that it's dry, because if we try to draw on top of a wet piece of paper with marker, then we might put a hole in our paper, kind of like how we talked about earlier. If you go over the same spot too many times with your paintbrush, then you might rip a hole in your paper. So just be mindful of that. I ended up making my plate just a basic white plate with some gray shadows on it, and I did put a gray shadow underneath my cheesecake, so it looked like there was actually light being casted on it, so you would see a cast shadow, like how in Wayne Thiebaud's paintings there was always shadows being cast from his cakes and his pies. So it's important that we add some shadows as well. And this time around I tried to be a lot more neat. I found that my first layer I was a little bit messy and I rushed it a little bit, so I tried my best to neaten it up this week and really be careful when I'm adding my water, especially in those little tiny areas. You only need to add just a little bit of water at a time. And that is our second layer done, and you might have to do 3 layers, you might want to do 4 layers. It's totally up to your preference and how dark you want your shadows and how vibrant you want your colors. Just make sure that you are letting it dry 100% before you add another layer. Next week, we are going to add the tablecloth in the background, so make sure you let this dry and keep it in a safe place so you are ready for next week. I can't wait to see how your Thiebaud pies are turning out. I know they're going to be amazing because you guys are amazing. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.